It's been exactly 2 months since I quit my investment banking job and started this new gig at the startup, and I thought it'd be about time for me to talk about what I've experienced so far, what the startup life is like compared to investment banking, how much I am thriving now that I have somewhat of free time, and if I'm still constantly nervous checking my phone for emails. I think the biggest difference, especially compared to investment banking, but at least on my personal experience, has to do with the idea of ownership. The very fact that you've moved on from a client-facing service to a job where you're literally responsible for the product, for the service that you're developing on behalf of your company, not just in a startup versus banking perspective, but what I call a real company versus something like banking or accounting, where you're servicing someone. Now that I am working on behalf of kind of myself, obviously I don't own the company quite literally, I'm not the founder, but the very fact that I am adding value to a cause, to a service, to a product that I am representing versus working on behalf of or representing someone is a really different mindset. And I don't know if I've drank the Kool-Aid too much or I'm lying to myself just so that I could say I did the right thing by leaving banking. But there's something to be said about wanting to work a bit more, wanting to work harder, and feeling more positive about the work that you do because you feel like it's actually making a direct impact on the cause slash service slash organization that you're representing versus being in a service-oriented client-facing role where you feel like, yes, you are representing a service, you are providing a service, but a lot of times you're more of a representation of someone else rather than being your true self, which I think in a startup, real company perspective, you do get. Aside from banking, the startup angle version of that is the very fact that because everything's so new and people really need to take initiative for things to get done, a lot of things are getting figured out as it is happening. You are building the boat as you're on the boat. So much, if not all the work, is things that you find, things that you take initiative of rather than a staffer assigning you work, you randomly getting staffings in the middle of the day saying you need to work on this. It's more of a problem I need to solve. And a lot of times you do quarterly plannings and your manager does say, these are the goals I need you to achieve for this quarter, or these are the goals that our team needs to achieve for the year. But the different projects, different initiatives, different quarterly goals that you set for yourself are very self-driven, and you oftentimes have to be a measurement. You often have to take initiative of measuring whether or not giving yourself feedback a lot of times to see if you're going towards the goal correctly. And unlike banking where there's 4, 5, 6 levels of chains of command where you're giving work to the next person, the person gives it to level up all the way up, and then the comments and the feedback trickles down. A lot of times you're directly working with one person or working across a wide variety of aisles across the team, across the company, depending on how small or big the company is, looking for feedback, looking for support. But you yourself are a very vital, big portion of that function. And a lot of times you might get really quick feedback, very brief feedback compared to the hours of feedback that you may get in banking or other service-oriented jobs, and you feel truly responsible. And obviously this is a dual-edged sword. I think in banking, although we strive for perfection and you get roasted a lot for not being perfect and missing that Oxford comma sometimes, you have that subconscious innate thinking that if you don't catch that mistake, there's probably going to be an associate, a VP, a director, or an MD finally catching that mistake. And obviously you still want to give it your best, but I think that subconscious thought plays through. Whereas in startups, one, there's not enough people to check those things. Two, it's fast-paced, you gotta get to market, you gotta do the work that you're given, you are a bigger proportion, bigger responsibility weight carrying person compared to the rest of the company because startups typically are smaller. So innately and subconsciously, you know that the work that you do will have a much bigger impact and there's not gonna be that chain of command constantly checking your work. So you really wanna perfect it on your end, make sure you wanna own up to it, you feel proud of the work that you're doing, and you know that it might be implemented, and very well will be implemented in ways that will actually impact the business. The skill sets you need at working at a startup, at a tech venture, or whatever company the startup may be, is vastly different from banking. I think core stuff does translate. You wanna know your Excel skills, you wanna be able to draft emails pretty well. Obviously a prettier, tighter presentation deck is better than a loose, messed up, a lot of mistakes presentation deck. However, it's much less about over presentation, over accuracy of certain documents, because oftentimes it's not client oriented. We're not serving the client, but it's important to get the product out there, make sure operations are going well, measure KPIs based off the operations so that you can improve and enhance whatever you're building. I think there's far less sanitation checks on things like grammar or making sure the logos are aligned if you're doing an internal presentation. A lot of communication is done internally, and it's far focused on quality of product, quality of presentation, in some ways speed and efficiency so that we can get things done, as opposed to this hyper focus on presentation or professionalism that I think banking really tries to highlight, because the core competencies, the main differentiating factor within firms is the ability to perfect the processes that have already been done for 100 years to stand out by being the most professionalized, well-rounded firm. Whereas I think if you're in a product-oriented, service-oriented startup, the important thing is that the product and the service works, that it works well for the customers, that the internal meetings are going smoothly, everyone is on the same page, rather than looking professional and dandied up for the sole purpose of looking professional and dandied up. On a more tangible sense, I think a lot of startups and tech companies in general work heavily with databases, whereas banking is a lot of cleaning up data and analyzing data so that it looks prettier. Many times in tech ventures and startups, you're using data to analyze and look at KPIs to make sure, are we doing the things that we want to do? How do we implement historical data and not make the same mistakes again and learn from the data that we have? So you go heavily into databases. That's a long way of saying that SQL is very important, something that I never learned in banking, never used in banking, and I've basically had to teach myself, and I am still teaching myself in a tangible sense, something very important to learn that I didn't get much in banking. I think there's also other startup-y related terms and tools that you use. For example, I have finally moved on to Slack from using Skype or Microsoft Teams that banking typically uses, and a whole array of tools and gadgets that I think just frankly don't need in banking, but you do need in tech, depending largely on what the startup actually does. Bottom line, a lot of different platforms slash tech apps and things that you never use in banking that you get to learn, and phrases like sprints or stand-ups that you never use in banking that you use in startups. And SQL is big. Lastly, everyone's favorite taboo word, everyone's favorite thing to talk about when it comes to jobs and everything, but diversity. I'm not going to comment on banking's diversity or lack of diversity in this video, but one thing that I've been not shocked, because I've obviously heard things and I've seen things, but especially compared to banking, startup culture, tech world is far most diverse, and I have seen the benefits and experienced the benefits of that I've never experienced before. I'm not going to go into the details of what I mean by diverse. Obviously, startups and tech culture also has their far array of issues related to diversity, but coming from a banking background, I think I've been very pleasantly surprised, I guess pleasantly not surprised, but experiencing the benefits that come with diversity and working along with people that I have never worked before. One thing that I would like to criticize slash note about working at startups, and I think this makes sense given the nature of the work and how new the general industry is, but especially coming from banking, there is a sharp decline of older folks. I think in banking, a lot of it is relationship management, especially at the MD level. There's a lot of people coming from MBAs, doing associates, so a lot of people that I work with directly were sometimes 5, 10, 15, 20 years older than me. Some of them had kids that were my age. Now that I'm at the startup, a lot of people that I work with are closer to me in age. There are some people that are younger than me in age. The oldest people I ever work with are rarely 10 plus years older than me. I don't know how that feeds into team efficiency, team productivity. It is a weird fear that perhaps it means that as I get older, I have to think about other moves unless I get into a really executive role. That's a whole different array of ideas and thoughts that I can dish out regarding ageism and how age plays into careers. But that is one thing I noticed in the tech sphere. One other thing that I noticed, more on less racial and gender diversity, but career diversity, is that people really come from a wide variety of backgrounds. Obviously, the highest concentration is from bigger tech companies and other tech-related experiences, but there's also a whole different side of people that come as grad students, as MBA students. I know people that have had service-oriented jobs, banking jobs, accounting jobs, and very outside-the-box jobs that you would never think of. A lot of marketing folks, branding people, obviously the software engineers. I don't work with all these people on a daily basis, but it is something to be upset about. Where in banking, you're majority working with finance and accounting folks and MBA people from top elite university or target schools. In startups, I think you really do get a wide variety of people that have become sick and tired of those lifestyles or have done something completely different, and they kind of want a sit down and get on the groove on a computer perspective. So it is really that wide spectrum of individuals looking for their next step in their career. Very poetically, I think startups of their own serve as incubators for individuals that are looking for that interesting twist and turn, that risky step towards the next point of their career. Thanks everyone for watching as always. I know I've taken different jabs and stabs at a variety of videos. I know that the YouTube algorithm really doesn't like me right now, probably talking from different books to golf tips to career stuff that I usually talk about. I'm not necessarily doing this for the internet money, but I know that I gotta give it what it wants sometimes for me to maintain my audience, but stay tuned for me continuously innovating and trying different things because I like sharing about myself and I love myself. That's what the internet's about. It's telling the world how much you love yourself. See you guys in the next video. Let's go.